Welcome to 56-Bit Cloud Cafe, your go-to destination for all tech topics in the cloud. I'm Athir Zalal.
And I'm Patrick Camilleri. And together we'll be addressing various cloud topics.
Today is the final episode of the CloudWatch series. This episode will be packed with insights into CloudWatch Dashboards, performance, monitoring, scalability, and the critical aspects of security and compliance. So let's start our comprehensive discussion to master CloudWatch for a secure and efficient cloud experience. Let's start with our first question today. Different teams need to view and track different points. How can users leverage CloudWatch dashboards to create customized views of their metrics and logs?
Right, so users can create dashboards, which is a sub-feature of AWS CloudWatch, to create widgets, which are small boxes showing charts, showing different ways of the data that you want to show. And these widgets, they can be placed together on a dashboard. There are already dashboards that are created by AWS themselves. These are usually service specific. So you would have a dashboard for RDS, a dashboard for EC2, a dashboard for auto scaling. But you can create your own custom dashboards which relates to you and your application or even your company. So then you can add different metrics from different services that make sense to you depending on the KPIs, on the key performance indicators that you value in your company. You can use filters and dimensions to drill down into the data and only show the relevant things. And ultimately, you can create multiple dashboards for different teams. You can have one dashboard for the application team, one for the software development team, one for the testing team, and another one for the business team, right? So the level of insight you go into and what widgets, what metrics you show on those dashboards is ultimately up to you and fully customizable. As an example of this, we can basically take an example of an e-commerce app. Imagine you can build a dashboard with widgets showing key metrics like website traffic, order volume on the e-commerce app, maybe more technical things like API response times. Then you can use filters to focus on specific regions or product categories that you are tracking. And then you can create a dashboard for your team. Maybe your team that focuses on the North America region of this app. Or maybe another one that focuses on development of a specific service. So it allows you to drill down and show only what is relevant to that team.
Okay, amazing. Now, efficiency in such dashboards is key for a successful monitoring and logging solution. Are there any best practices for designing effective CloudWatch dashboards?
There definitely is. As always in AWS and in IT in general, there are always best practices for everything, including on how to design good dashboards. This serves as best practices not just for CloudWatch, but any dashboarding tool you might use. The most important thing I can tell you from a best practice perspective is to make a story, to create a story. So if you, and to create a story, imagine you are creating a script for a movie, right? You will need to know who your audience is. A movie which is a scary movie is very different from one which is a funny movie. So the script has to be exactly what you want that audience to hear and to see. And it's the same thing with dashboards. If you are targeting your dashboard for non-technical people, then you need to know what metrics they will actually understand, what makes them tick, basically, and show only those metrics that makes them understand and be able to action it. Anything else is extra. Same with technical people. They will need to have a deeper dive into their area of focus. So that's number one, to have a story and show only KPIs and metrics which make sense to the audience you're targeting. Secondly, don't put too many metrics. This tends to overload a user. It's better to put in 5 than to put in 20 metrics on a single dashboard. Even if those 20 are all targeted for that user, do not do that. It's better to reduce and ultimately show that story in more simplistic terms. You can also group related metrics together. So if you're talking to a technical person and he or she is focused on a specific area of the application, then show metrics related to that area and group them using a grouping methodology which makes sense to the user. You can add titles, you can add legends, you can annotate, add extra information to the metrics themselves to give more context for that user. Don't forget that dashboards are something which is constantly being seen on a day-to-day basis, so the immediate decisions need to be made as soon as you see it. And also, if there are things outside of the normal patterns, they need to be really visible. They need to stick out for that user.
Okay, perfect. The call to our solution always ends on the application level. How does CloudWatch assist in monitoring the performance of applications and ensuring scalability?
Yes, so auto-scaling and provisioning resources like EC2 instances and RDS databases and other things in a dynamic fashion, or also we call it an elastic fashion, meaning depending on the amount of traffic coming in, you increase resources and then you decrease those resources if there isn't that much traffic so that you reduce costs. That is called elasticity, and it's very important in the cloud. It's one of the biggest advantages of the cloud. CloudWatch is a key component of that because you cannot increase or decrease resources unless you know when to increase them or decrease them, when you have traffic and when you don't. So that's where CloudWatch fits in, and what you need to do is basically decide which metric is going to trigger this auto-scaling and create an alarm on that metric. That alarm will trigger an auto-scaling policy. Auto-scaling policies are usually part of the service like EC2 or RDS or other services. The alarms are part of CloudWatch, and the metrics as well are part of CloudWatch.
Now, the technical level is fully covered with the stated practices, but what about the cost? Can you provide insights into how CloudWatch can contribute to cost optimization by monitoring resource usage?
When it comes to cost usage, CloudWatch is one of the most essential tools you can have. The reason is that you need to know where you are wasting money to be able to ultimately reduce that waste. And literally it is waste. In the cloud, it is very easy to increase and decrease resources. So if you are overusing something, you are creating more than you need, then you are wasting. So to identify where this happens, you need CloudWatch or a monitoring tool to ultimately show you those patterns. As an example of this, you might use something like a CloudWatch metric for an RDS database, which shows you that your CPU is being used at 5% and the maximum it has ever gone up was 20%. So one thing you can do is reduce the size of your database to ensure that at least you get better value for your money. Even though it is at a lower instance size, a lower amount of CPU and RAM, that RTS database will work exactly the same. For your use case, it will give you the same performance, but you also get a reduced price. And this is known as right sizing, and this can be done on EC2, can be done on multiple services, which ultimately is probably the best thing you can do and the first thing you should do when it comes to cost optimization. CloudWatch is an important piece of that puzzle.
Talking about costs, FinOps teams are always on the edge when it comes to costs on the cloud. Are there any tips for users to efficiently use CloudWatch without incurring unnecessary costs?
Yes, just like in every AWS service, CloudWatch is also based on how much you use, how many metrics you send, how many logs you send, and how many times you retrieve those logs and metrics. That's how you pay. So ultimately, the less you send and the less you receive, the better in terms of price. But obviously, you need to make sure that it is valuable to you. So it's all about finding a balance and using the tools available to make sure that you automatically reduce those costs. For example, CloudWatch logs, the logs themselves, you can put a retention policy, and each log group can have a different retention policy. So a log group which deals with compliance or security kind of logs, then you would keep it for longer than you would for a troubleshooting log, because if you're troubleshooting something that happened 3 months ago, usually that doesn't happen, right? So you are usually troubleshooting something which happened yesterday or the week before or a couple of weeks before. So you would keep those logs for a month whilst you keep more important logs for longer, and that reduces costs. When receiving data on your dashboards, on your using CloudWatch Log Insights and other tools, when receiving, you're also paying for the amount that you receive. So if you reduce the size of what you receive using more optimized queries in Log Insights, using filters and dimensions with dashboards, these are the things that you can do to reduce what comes back from CloudWatch and ultimately reducing your costs. There are other ways as well, like using aggregated metrics for less critical data, and there are different ways of implementing that, but ultimately it's all about finding that balance between useful data versus wasted, not useful data. The not useful, try to reduce it, and that reduces cost.
And finally, the cherry on top here goes to security. How does CloudWatch contribute to ensuring the security and compliance of AWS environments?
This is a very important question because security and compliance are top of mind for any chief technical or chief information officer out there. And the way you secure your infrastructure, your AWS infrastructure through AWS services is by monitoring and actioning. Monitoring is done through a number of services. You have AWS CloudTrail, you have AWS Config, but also AWS CloudWatch. So we'll focus on that. So CloudWatch allows you to monitor metrics which are sent by your application, like number of login attempts or patterns which do not make sense. You might want to log those. You can also send metrics or even bring out metrics from errors in the logs. So you're joining those two metrics and logs together. And all these things, then you can action with that. You can automate the security part by launching Lambda functions. You can launch system manager scripts. You can send alerts, or you can integrate with a number of other third-party security tools as well. So it's all about logging the proper things and actioning from those logs. This is true for performance, true for cost optimization, for reliability, for general know-how of what is happening, business intelligence, but also true for security.
As we reach the end of our CloudWatch series, we appreciate you joining us to explore dashboards, scalability, and security. Expect more interesting AWS insights in our upcoming episodes. Thank you for being part of our CloudWatch exploration. Until then, happy cloud computing!
If you have questions, suggestions, or want to share your feedback, connect with us on social media.
Also, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and to leave us a review to help others find their way to the Cloud Cafe.